But yeah, these are things to kind of think about. All right. So, Gio, thank you for
Yes.
joining us. I resurrected your tutorial from a year ago where I
Oh
gave you
yeah.
a fucked up file. We realized that an hour in. So I shared that in I uploaded the Zoom recording on YouTube and shared it on Slack. But I wanted to bring you here to be able to answer any questions as folks have started to dabble with the post editing. We're still in the gathering phase, but kind of poking at it
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I always forget the solutions to the two things where I always forget the vocabulary. You know the two things that I will talk about. So I'm going to ask those questions first. And then if you guys have particular questions, please let's take advantage of Gio's time. He's graciously offered to be available. So did Billy as well, but Gio has been involved with journalism more actively. The first thing is when there's a black dot on top and black dot on bottom. It is because it was exported at Letterbox. How do you fix that? And what is the word? What's the vocabulary I need to memorize so I can say the solution?
Okay, well, the first thing that always happens, or somehow always happens, is, well, let me take a step back. Back when we recorded with multiple different types of cameras, having things show up on the same resolution timeline was a real big problem. Why? Because
the second problem I was going to say. So start with that one. We are
okay,
using two cameras. We're using an Insta 361X and our GoPro Max. So
got
I
it.
foresee that problem coming up.
And are they both 5.7?
One is 4. No. Well, the goal is both of them being 4K at 4096 by 2048, but I don't remember if Insta 1X does that exactly.
Got it.
Before cameras were 4K in quotes, but it was like 3.7 something. They rounded it up before. These for sure are 4, but I don't remember the resolution.
Right. Okay. So
let's assume they don't match up.
Let's assume it. So if they don't match up, that's bad. um, um, basically, 360 editing is really complicated because if you don't have the exact pixel density or the aspect ratio the same across every clip that you run, you either do one of two things: letterboxing, which gives you the pin effect on the top and bottom, as Profe just mentioned, but also you can have an oversizing where now you have a weird fold on one part of the video, and it essentially looks like the video is folded in on itself, and that's because the video is too big at that point. So both are problematic. What I would hope is that both GoPro and Insta360, and I think at this point it's pretty standardized, uses the same aspect ratio. So even if the resolution is smaller, you should be able to take a 4K image, stretch it to 5K, let's say, or 3.7, whatever it is, and it should fit the box exactly the same because the aspect is the same. The video quality may suffer just a tad, but it won't be enough to cause major issues with the actual laying out and editing of your video. So I think what a lot of people did in the past is they would open up a timeline. So everybody's using Premiere, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, you can do like new sequence, and then you can change it based on a certain setting, DVSD, all the different like codecs and stuff, right? So I think what happened was people would use the VR codec and go, oh, this is the aspect and the resolution, and this makes sense, I should use it. And it wouldn't match perfectly with the video, but they wouldn't catch that until all the way at their end of the edit. And at that point, now you got a real problem, because you either have to copy that sequence and paste it into another sequence and hope that you can actually upscale it or downscale it appropriately and everything's going to match, or you have to start from scratch back in the day. So that's probably not going to be a problem for you guys. I mean, Profe, what's the last time that the letterboxing was an issue the 2 semesters ago?
The letterboxing is one that comes. Wait. I'm sorry. I may have missed it because I was distracted that a thumbs up showed up over your face.
Oh, what?
That wasn't me.
No, I think it reacts to it.
Oh, this is the thing where you do this. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is that your setting or my setting?
No, this is macOS Sonoma. It's the new reactions
Oh,
in
right.
macOS Sonoma. Yeah. And then yeah.
So I was distracted. What is the solution to what is the solution if you put them together and one is either smaller or bigger than the what I call canvas?
Yeah.
What do you fix it?
So the solution would be you would want to create a new sequence with the appropriate resolution, right? Again, we're assuming that both cameras are shooting in the same aspect. I forget what it is, like 16 by 20. Say again?
It's 2-to-1 or 1-to-2, whatever
whatever it is. So as long as it's the same aspect ratio, you should be fine. So then basically just create a new sequence and normalize the resolution. So make sure it's that aspect ratio. And if it's 4K, you always want to, with any camera in general, you want to downscale and not upscale. So if you're shooting 5.7K, you're better off making the timeline 4K than taking, let's say, a 4K video and trying to upscale it to 5.7K. You're just going to have more resolution, more bit depth to work with. So the video quality won't suffer as much as it would suffer the other way around. So normalize it, create a new sequence, then copy and paste your old video clips from the old sequence into the new sequence. Now, if you had messed with the scaling attributes of any of those clips, you're going to want to neutralize those. If I remember correctly with Premiere, you can right click and say delete set, I forget what it's called, delete settings, or, like you can copy effects over, one clip to another. You just basically delete the effects on all the clips. And that would basically kind of bring everything back to zero. At that point, assess whether one camera's resolution is still higher than the other. You should see not letterboxing, you should see everything shrunk, right? So you should see black borders around everything. If that happens, no big deal. Upscale the clip to fit the whole box, and you should be totally fine. That's the number one issue that people have. And if you just watch for it early on, it should not be a problem for you guys. I just think a lot of people think somehow the letterbox is like this filmic thing that's supposed to be there because that's what you watch movies in, and no,
it's a user error in exporting, if I recall. But to go back a little bit, I remember a solution where you check a box that said match. Again, I use Photoshop, so I say canvas. But make canvas match the source footage. Isn't that a way to do that too?
Yes. So you can, the other way to do it is, let's say you decide that, okay, so basically the way I put it before was if you had caught the mess up in the middle of your work, that's the way to do it. Before you do any of that, if you're like, I want to get it right from the beginning, go ahead and take one of the clips that you know is the resolution you want to work with, right click it, and create new sequence from clip.
That one.
That's the one.
Okay. So here's what our pixel ratio is: 4096 by 2048.
The ratio. That's the resolution, not the ratio.
Yes, that's a 2-to-1 ratio. But that's the resolution: 4096 by 2048. If you only want to remember one number, is 4096. Cut that in half, that'll get you 2048. That is 4K. That's what we work with. When you export from GoPro Max and you select 4K, that should be the pixel count. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I think the 4096 works if it's a GoPro, but what if my footage from Enza, for example, their footage is 3840 by 1920.
So that
So
one,
I've
you have
upscaled
to
it.
stretch it up.
Okay.
So we have to, I don't think it'll be that noticeable, but give it a go. The worst case is that you make everything match the smaller one and then we export it to increase it. But I think the goal is that we use GoPro as our dominant footage,
Got it.
right? And then their footage would be the exception. But I don't think we haven't really had big issue. It doesn't get super pixelated, but it is Insta360s were in the past a little grainy. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. But yeah, I would increase Enza's footage, the Insta. What happens if they're at different frame rates?
Okay. So if you're working with 24 versus 30, I'm assuming.
Well, what would you when you did it? What
Yes.
is the frame rate setting that we should go with? The default, I think, is 30.
Yeah.
I've seen 29.97.
Yeah.
I don't understand the story about that. I'm sure you might know it. And
Yes.
then people have done 24 frames or even 60 frames. But we're
Okay.
aiming for 30 frames, I believe.
So, okay. So this is the way to look at it. 29.97 is the NTSC broadcast standard. That was very important back in the day when you'd actually broadcast videos over the air, because that missing point, whatever of a frame, was actually there to store data and some other things. And that was like very important for transmission, because we're not actually transmitting video on broadcast. That's not as important of a standard to worry about. 30 frames is the standard frame rate that every eyeball is the most used to. It's what your iPhones natively shoot at. It's what everything natively shoots at, pretty much. So people are going to watch that video. It's going to look normal to them. 24 frames per second is filmic. That's what most films are shot in. They're either shot in 24 or 48, which is a duplication of the 24. And it's going to look a little slower, a little choppier, but it gives you that filmic look. It is a little bit harder to edit with 24, though, because if you are recording in high motion environments and you have what they call, oh man, I'm blanking on it. Oh man, it's basically like cameras. Oh, rolling shutter. That's it. If you're recording something, there's a lot of fast movement. You can sometimes get rolling shutter where half the screen is kind of a little bit ahead of the other one, and you get this kind of like cut effect that happens. Happens a lot with DSLR cameras, and not as much with 360 cameras. And then 60 frames is the new cool way to shoot. I guess you guys tell me. It seems like all the cool kids are shooting in 60 now. On Instagram, literally everyone's shooting in 60. I don't get it, because it is the least forgiving frame rate. You literally make one shake on the camera, it is so obvious to the end user that like it was jumpy, shaky, there was a movement. So I say all of this to say that 30 is your friend. And if you stick to 30, most of the times you're not going to be disappointed. And it gives you enough of a buffer so that if you do, in fact, screw up a shot a little bit, it won't be as obvious as with some of the other frame rates.
So let's say Enza shares footage and it is at 24 or 29.7. When it merges with our footage at 30 frame rates, they'll either be sped up or slowed down. I forget which way it is. So
yeah. So if you took a 30 frames per second timeline and you brought a 24 frames per second video into it, you'd have what you call frame interpolation, which basically means that it's going to artificially create frames to make the 24 frames feel like a 30 frame. And
does it do it automatically, or do you have to manually change it?
At one point, you had to manually change the speed settings of the clip and actually stretch the clip to make it act or feel like a 30 frames per second. Oh, there we go. Balloons now. But now I'm pretty sure Adobe has gotten smart enough where it recognizes it that it's a different frame rate, and it should prompt a box that says like, this is a different frame rate. Want to, extend the frames or whatever, and then you just would say yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
In the past, students had to manually change it, and so they had to eyeball it because the frame rate didn't match even when they put 30 frames. They had to eyeball speeding it up or slowing it down or something like that.
Yeah, just in general, folks, the best thing you can do is always check your settings before you start filming. It's going to save you a lot of time.
Evil laugh. The only way you learn those when you fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, shit, and then you don't want to do that again. Happens all the time when we talk about audio. Put the headphones on or you'll get burned. Your hair's going to get messy, but your audio is going to be good. Check your batteries or you're going to get burned. So people only learn until they get burned.
Right.
Okay, one thing you didn't say, but I want to say too, is we talked about back to the resolutions don't match.
Yeah.
Telltale sign is if it overlaps or if when you look behind, there's a black line, meaning that the footage didn't have enough pixels to connect.
That's right.
The black pin on top and the bottom is when you export, and by accident you made it letterboxy. What you remember what to hit? You need to check anything or uncheck something when you export?
You should be able to export just with the VR mono. I don't think it's stereoscopic. I forget the exact setting, but basically you're just choosing the VR preset from the Adobe exporter, and that should be enough to make sure that it stays within the sequence of your frame of your timeline. Because again, remember, if you're creating a new sequence from clip, it's going to recognize it as a 2:1, which 2:1 aspect ratio is one of the few aspect ratios used in VR. So it automatically knows, oh, this has to be VR. And then when you export it and you choose the VR export, it should recognize it right off the bat. Before, a long time ago, you would actually inject metadata. You remember that? Yeah. So that was old school VR. That was like 2016, 2017. Not so much a big deal today. So that should be fine. You shouldn't have to touch anything else. Just make sure you're exporting, not doing the over under, which is 3D VR, which I don't believe you guys are shooting with.
Yeah, that's stereoscopic.
No.
Yeah, so what that means is once you check that box and you export it that way, you can upload it to YouTube, you can upload it to Facebook, and it will render it as something that you can look around it. If it renders equirectangular, one on YouTube, it looks like that. It still needs time to process before it makes it spherical. But if it's been an hour and it's not spherical, then you can check. There's software you can download. It's called like Meta Injector. 360 Meta Injector. I have the software, it's free. Macs, much easier. PCs, you have to use terminal to work it. You can open up a file there and it'll tell you if it has the meta info to make it a 360. If not, you can inject it there. But again, just export, you're good. All right, those are the common mistakes that always happen. Thank you, Gio, for saying it correctly, opposed to me saying like it's the canvas and then you hit a checkbox. You guys have questions and issues. Nevin, you have your hand up. You want to go first?
So I did export something, but I think the issue that I faced was after I uploaded up on YouTube, I can send you the link. You can take a look and see what. I'm not sure why this happens. I'll send it on Slack.
Put it on Slack and I'll share it here.
Okay.
Share desktop.
Yeah, it seems like it's like zoomed in.
Okay.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's what's happening.
See that?
Yep.
So that is because the resolution is too big for the canvas, and so it's overlapping. So think of this is the canvas, the video is bigger than the canvas.
What was the export setting that I'm supposed to do?
So
It's a sequence issue. It's not an export issue.
correct.
Sequence issue, right?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so it's only this scene, right? It's the Insta360. So you got to look at what the Insta360 footage match sequence to what Jill said. There is something so if all goes well, it's a sphere, right? How big is that sphere can determine whether someone's close to you or far from you, right? We rarely mess with that, but I have messed with it when I've worked on the projects. I'll deal with that when I upload, but that is something I forgot what it's called. Do you know what it's called, Gio? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Say that one more time.
The distance between the center and the sphere. You can make the sphere bigger. This is on YouTube or Vimeo. I can.
Oh yeah,
override.
yeah. You can
What
use
is
the
it?
mouse wheel. You basically use the
Yeah,
mouse
it's
wheel.
like zooming. How big is the sphere of the video? Leave it to default.
Yeah.
I have to pay our Vimeo bill to get our Vimeo account back, but that one is had the ability for me to override it. But I leave it to default unless it feels too distant or way too close. That's the time I mess with that. But
Yeah.
that is not the case here. That is because the resolution doesn't match the file or the sequence.
Okay.
More questions? Did you have a question, Phil?
I think I just bumped up when I did that.
Oh.
Yeah. Because the rest of my videos are all good. It was just
Okay.
the first one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I messed up. I mentioned you all when I went to TJ, the most important shot didn't record audio. And fuck. Yes. Wait, does that work for us?
No.
No, it's your city. Other questions? Gio, have you used AI to remove the tripods yet or anything like that before?
Oh yeah, the generative fill on Photoshop.
I haven't done it in Photoshop. So chat, I already forgot what it was. Chat sent me, this was a couple years ago, a website where you can upload footage and then you could, so we use this to remove the shadow of the drone and to remove the zip line camera when you looked up. A moving shadow, basically. When we do the removing of Photoshop, everything is static, so that's not a problem. But if the shadow moves or someone moves through the shadow, there was this website we found, which I got to remember, that would remove it using AI back in the day. And I was just curious if you've messed with any of that.
No, I mean I'm working with AI a lot right now, but not in that capacity. I've never used it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was your semester, but I met someone who had a VFX software. That was the only way to remove moving shadows before. I couldn't make it to class, so she came and guest lectured. Apparently, it was a disaster because she was expecting VFX students, and everyone's like, "We don't know what the fuck you're talking about." And apparently, she was mean to my students. So
Oh no.
we don't use that product.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mock-up and the filming I did, I just still sent the screenshot through for the export settings. This is what I'm exporting from the GoPro.
Okay.
But I just put that in Slack if I can get some answers.
Sure. Where did you put in the class? Oh, okay. So I had shared this before.
The options for world lock and the rest all like you can't even uncheck them.
Oh shit. Okay, so here's a couple things. So it was shot at 3 or 80. What camera is it?
GoPro.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay, well, something happened in the settings where it wasn't at 4K. It was shot at 3840 by 2160. That is a different, that's not even a 2:1 aspect ratio. So I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Yeah, you see it says upscaled.
Yeah, upscaled. Was that 360 footage?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Because it says projection, GoPro lens, H.264. I've not seen this before.
Okay.
Do you have any guesses here? That's not the right aspect ratio.
No, I mean, I don't know I mean, if this is not GoPro's native aspect ratio, if I had to guess, either it was shot like this and it's upscaling it to a different resolution, which it's not showing here. Like what happens? Oh, this is just a screenshot. I was gonna say, what happens if you clicked HD? It would be interesting to see how the resolution changes. But yeah, it's possible you were filming at a lower res, and it's I don't know. I mean, I don't. I'm an Instant 360 guy. I'm not a GoPro guy for the most part, so I'm not sure.
So it is possible that it was set maybe at time lapse or something.
Okay.
That's the only thing I could think of, or it is only shooting out of the front lens and not the back lens, so it's not 360.
No, but you got the option of
All right, so
let me go on the app
okay.
and see.
If I were to guess, if I were to bet, y'all, you break my heart. Don't let it sit on the table on the lens. Okay. I would guess that it's only using a front or back lens in that shot.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
It was HD first, and then so I clicked,
There you go.
there was an option there for 4K, so I clicked that, but it had already the upscale, and then on all of the settings there was no option to take off the world lock, or like it was only the mount optimization.
And you're sure this is 360 footage?
Yeah, because when I brought that into
You can
the
turn it around.
when I brought that into the GoPro desktop app, I could turn it around. And I could trim it, and there was audio, like it was on the GoPro desktop app. It was like I was doing all my other footage. It was just when I went to like export the trim version that these are the settings that popped up.
Yeah, I guess let's look at the footage to kind of give you the thoughts on it. But if I were gonna bet, I would say that it's using the front or the back camera at like HD, and then it got zoomed up to be 3840, because that's the most it can do. Like, because it's not 2x1. 2x1 is spherical.
That's a 16:9, probably.
Yeah. So that's just exactly.
Oh, it did say that in the corner on the.
So that means it's only used. It's a traditional
2D.
It's 2D, or as another colleague calls it, flatties. So front or back. So sometimes when you view flatties in the 360 viewer,
Yeah.
it will force it to be 360. And so when you look, if you look down and it's pinched, or look up and it's pinched, or kind of like Nevin's video, that means that something is off in doing that. Even though you can move around, that doesn't necessarily mean it's spherical. It means it's presented spherically, but it isn't spherical. Yeah, I would guess that's
Okay.
front camera or back camera.
Okay.
I would also just point out here, just so no one makes this mistake, do not export in HEVC. That is a H.265 compression, which is, you'll think, oh, wow, the file size so much smaller. That's great. It is way more taxing on your computers to edit in HEVC. So I just say, like, avoid it. Just don't do it, because you're going to regret it. So
yeah, H.264 is the way to go. ProRes, that's if you're trying to do something else.
a lot of color grading, which you guys are not doing.
Yeah, and it'll take up a lot of your hard drive space. Yes, Nevin.
Is there a target bitrate that you want us to export for like 360 footage?
Did you have one? I just leave it as default. You remember?
I would leave it as default too. I mean, the thing with bitrate is, and there are two things that really make bitrate important. Oh boy, here we go. So the two things are, one, if you have a lot of motion in a frame, bitrate is important because it will look just not as good. And two, if you have a lot of color action going on. Bitrate can be important too. In this case, back when we were using, you remember Robert, the Z cam?
Yeah.
Yeah. Back when we were using the Z cam, we were exporting at 75 megabits per second. That's a pretty big bit rate. I think now a lot of people are doing 60 because that's like YouTube's already compressing the video anyways. But I mean, look, if you have extra time, experiment with it and just like, export one at a higher bit rate, export one at a lower bit rate, compare the two, look at it one for one. And if one looks dramatically different than the other, then you have your answer. But I would say default is usually fine.
But what if they're using footage from another camera that has a different bit rate? Is that like frame rate?
I mean, think of it this way. It's like if you took a pixel that was a certain quality and you expanded it across the screen, it would still be that same quality. You've just now stretched it. So it's a little bit more obvious to people, right? At some point, it's like the way, I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the difference between Photoshop editing and Illustrator editing, vectors versus JPEGs, right? A vector file, you can stretch and it's going to always maintain its quality. A JPEG, you can't. And in the same way, it's bit depth with cameras too. Bit depth, bit rate is just kind of referring to the actual quality of the pixel itself, whereas resolution is how many pixels are on a given canvas. So the higher the bit rate, so going back to your question, Profe, it's like basically if you have a lower bit rate, but you have other video that has a higher bit rate, you can still export at a higher bit rate. It's just going to basically take that lower one and try to upscale it. So it's not going to improve the quality, but it shouldn't diminish it either.
Okay. Cool.
I know a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So I was wondering, I managed to export it and it works on YouTube. Perfect. So
Okay.
thanks for the suggestion. It was
The footage that we just
the
looked at?
footage, yeah.
Okay.
I managed to fix that so that
What was the mistake? What was
the
the
mistake? I think because I was trying to match to that sequence setting that y'all mentioned,
4096?
96, yeah. But unfortunately, the footage is not that.
What is the footage?
The footage is 38401920. That's the footage that Enza gave.
Okay. So you have to upscale it.
Upscale it, yeah. So
well-
I just left it as
Okay.
what the source is to
Okay.
actually work with. So it was fine. The question.
Oh shoot, sorry.
No, it's fine. It was something related to like while editing actually. Oh my god. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Playing the sphere, we've talked about. Rotate sphere, we've talked about. The VR preview
Yeah.
is great. We haven't done too much with in terms of putting text, but the way we do it, just for simplicity's sake, is PNGs. I'll share those files when we get closer to that. We should standardize our stuff so they all look related. Our fonts will have the same font. If someone wants to take that on to own the design and the kind of like a style book, if they don't like what we have, that's fine too. Just we need to use the same thing over and over. Do you remember?
Yes.
Cool.
So because we're using two different types of cameras, I was wondering how do we manage color? And like, do we want to go flat profile for all the cameras, or what's your suggestion around?
Is this when we invoke the LUTs?
The LUTs. Haven't used LUTs for gosh knows how many years. But I don't know who's familiar with LUTs. Anybody familiar with LUTs?
Yeah.
Okay.
So those
Great.
of you that Gio was like, bro, we should talk about LUTs and to see the color and stuff
Yeah.
like that. LUTs is a lookup table.
Yes. So I was the LUTs guy my year, 7 years ago almost now. It's just crazy, but yeah. So here's my take on it. Some cameras are going to shoot a little bit more yellow. Some cameras are going to shoot a little bit more green. And at some point, okay, well, let me take a even bigger step back. Guys, if you can shoot with the same camera the whole time, do that. Okay? Like, that's going to solve all your problems. Seriously. But given the circumstance, The second suggestion I would say is use the same brand of camera, which you didn't do, but that's okay. So
Hey, we're
now,
not using the Samsung Gear. That's a big.
yeah, yeah, the Samsung Gear. Oh man, I remember that one. Little alien head thing. So yeah, so I would say like you're gonna have to eyeball it a little bit because the color temperature is gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be hard to normalize that. I don't know if Adobe has gotten smart enough now where you can do like you can apply a color temperature effect and it auto analyzes the clips and normalizes across the whole sequence. I'm not sure that's an effect. But in terms of the saturation and having it be flat, I think the thing with you guys is whenever you edit flat or in a log style format, whether it's vlog, slog, any of the logs, for higher dynamic range, right, which would be the reason why you would do that, you're going to have to know more about color grading. And if you're not comfortable with color grading and you don't know the difference between luminance and vibrance and saturation and the way to get, CMYK versus RGB and all that stuff, like if you don't feel comfortable operating in that space, avoid it. The average end user is not going to notice the difference. We learned this with the Salton Sea project. I was super hyped on LUTs. Nobody gave a shit about LUTs. Like,
It's not a deal breaker. You want if it's like night and day, two different things, just like something's burnt, washed out, or not enough contrast, you can turn the knobs a little bit. And some footage, it just got fucked and we can't use it.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I found my footage.
And?
It's 360.
No way.
It's 360, and I look down, and it doesn't look like.
No, that's not what it is.
Keep turning.
There's something off. Okay. It is 360. Import this into the export, and then let's see that later.
Okay.
There's something off. It was shot correctly. I don't know, maybe the button in there. I don't.
There's an info section. I can screenshot that as well.
Okay, what's it say?
That's correct resolution. It's 57362688.
Yeah. So that's good. Somehow in the exporting, something got messed up. Okay, so one thing I did not do is did not properly introduce Gio. I shared with you guys his bio on Slack, but Gio is an alum of Annenberg, an alum of journalism. Gio was the lead editor for the Salton Sea project that won our first big award. He's been a friend of this class. Actively mentoring and always a go-to person for video production. We have many stories of our work together. Our one we always share is one at 3 a.m. in the morning where our camera was glitching. This is why I talk about a hackathon style course. It was like a hackathon where at 3 in the morning, our brains were so fucking fried. It was as if we were high and we're like, are we fucked right now? Why is the video so slow? And it would just laugh. All we did was laugh for 20 minutes nonstop.
Yeah.
When we had a solder something, thank God for Ben Kramer. He was out there doing the project with us. But Gio graduated and worked for KTLA. Was that the first one out?
Mm-hmm.
KTLA editor. Well, talk about your titles and your career a little bit.
Sure.
But the KTLA, he was in charge of innovation and was doing 360 videos that I share the story that the sponsorship paid for his salary and then some. So that means there's money in this stuff. Not many people did what KTLA did with it. They should have done. More people should have done it. They were making money off of it. But yeah, tell us about your career.
Yeah, I mean, so I left college and left USC and got a really awesome opportunity to start in LA. And as a broadcast journalist, that's like not as common, and they really wanted to invest in emerging platforms. And so the first emerging platform that I convinced them that we should really focus on was 360 video. So it was great. I was able to literally finish editing Salton Sea. I remember actually where I finished editing it, which was
You were at a soccer camp.
yeah. I was on a football
Football.
I was working with quarterbacks, actually getting ready for the draft, and I was in Phoenix, and I brought what we called the Beast with me and finished the edit there, and all was good. We made it into the deadline, and we got the OJA, which was great. So yeah, so I started KTLA. For the first about 2 years, I was editing 360 video, doing different 360 video stories across Southern California. My title was Emerging Platforms Video Producer. So I did that. I managed social media accounts, really focused on growing our YouTube, and did a lot of YouTube lives back when that was like a really hot thing to do. And I kind of just noticed that I was falling more and more into strategy and more into sort of creative leadership, and finding myself doing less and less of the actual production. Now, looking back, is that a sad thing? Sure. I miss it a lot. I wish I was still hands-on with production every day. But you'll kind of learn that your skill sets will kind of guide you throughout your career, and you'll find yourself in a management position. I mean, my second job was director of audience growth up in Santa Cruz, and I was working for a local news startup there. And that was a really great opportunity for me to kind of move beyond just video production and really focus on audience strategy and audience growth, which, by the way, for all of you, no matter what you end up doing, if you want to focus on news or be in this industry, understanding audience is so critical to everything that you do, regardless if you're in production or not. So this idea that you have an audience team and then you have an editorial team is BS to me. Everybody needs to be an audience professional. And that's how you make sure that you're telling stories that resonate with the people that actually are going to consume it. So I did that for a year, and then moved back to San Diego, where I'm from. And now I'm a product manager. So focused on how do we make the user experience of consuming news online more accessible, more engaging. How do we make it less or easier to read, right? I focus a lot on investigative content now. So I work with reporters on trying to make their content more palpable and just easier to access at large. So my career has not been linear at all. And I could have never predicted 7 years out that I'd be in product management in news right now. But I've just kind of rolled with the punches. And, one thing you'll learn, and Profe is a perfect example of this, like sometimes things open up and opportunities open up, and you can initially say, oh, well, that wasn't my plan, or oh, that wasn't part of my career strategy or my 5-year goal. But sometimes you just got to take it, and you never know where it's going to take you, because I look back at even the good times and the bad times of my career so far, and I'm so much more well-rounded because of the opportunities I said yes to versus the opportunities I said no to. So that's, I guess, a little bit of me in a nutshell. Oh, and I'm on the alumni board at Annenberg. So I'm very involved in trying to make sure that you all have the best transition to being alums and feel supported in the work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you, Gio, for taking your time to pop in tonight and dropping knowledge. I will upload this video to YouTube for future classes as well. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, man.
See ya. You too.
Bye.